Subscribe now and hit the like button if you believe in second chances. Comment below. What's the biggest regret you've ever had? The billionaire's regret and the doctor's secret. The sterile hospital corridor froze for Alexander Montgomery. There she was, after 5 long years, dressed in a white coat, with a stethoscope draped around her neck, more beautiful than he remembered. And in her arms, a small boy with curly hair and unmistakable blue eyes, identical to his own. "Eleanor," his voice barely escaped as a whisper. Eleanor Hayes tensed, hearing her name in that voice she'd never been able to forget. She instinctively tightened her grip on her son, as if shielding him. "Alexander, what are you doing here?" she asked with a mix of surprise and harshness. "I'm part of the investor group touring the hospital," he replied, unable to tear his gaze from the little boy. "I didn't know you worked here." The child, curious, turned to look at the stranger talking to his mum. Alexander felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Those eyes were his own. "And he began to ask, his voice trembling. "My son," Eleanor cut him off sharply. "My son, Alexander. Something you clearly didn't care about when you decided your career was more important than us." The silence that fell between them seemed to hold 5 years of unspoken words. 5 years earlier, London glowed with that golden evening light that made everything seem possible. Eleanor Hayes and Alexander Montgomery walked hand in hand through the park, as they had every Friday since they met at university 3 years ago. "Can you imagine what our lives will be like when we finish?" Eleanor asked, resting her head on Alexander's shoulder. "You with your MBA, me as a pediatrician." Alexander smiled, kissing her forehead. "It'll be brilliant, my love. Everything we've dreamed of." Eleanor loved when he used those charming Scottish expressions he'd brought with him when he came to study in England. Brilliant. Wee bairn. Aye. Words that were now part of her own vocabulary. "You know what would be even more brilliant?" she replied, mimicking his accent. "That little house near the hospital we saw last week." Their plans seemed so clear, so certain. Eleanor finishing her pediatric residency, Alexander working at some local firm while waiting for the right moment to join the family business. A life together, maybe children, in the not-too-distant future, until that letter arrived. "I got in, love." Alexander burst into their small flat, waving an envelope with the logo of a prestigious international firm. "It's New York, the position I always wanted." Eleanor's smile froze. New York, thousands of miles from London, from her residency, from everything they had planned. New York? But what about our plans? "I can't leave now. I'm halfway through my residency and—" "We can make it work," he insisted, though his voice no longer sounded so convinced. "It's only for a year or 2, then I could ask for a transfer." The following days were a silent battle. Calls to hospitals in New York that had no places for foreign residents. Conversations with Alexander's family, who made it clear how much they expected him to take this opportunity. "My dad says it's the opportunity of a lifetime," Alexander explained during a dinner they barely touched. "It's the first step to eventually running the whole company. And what am I, Alex? An obstacle in your path to success." The words came out more bitterly than Eleanor intended. The final conversation happened one rainy night, in the cafe where they'd had their first date. The place that had always been their refuge now felt suffocating. "I can't turn this down, love," Alexander finally said, his voice broken, but determined. "I've worked my whole life for this opportunity." "And I thought we were building something more important," she replied, tears mingling with the rain as they stepped onto the street. "Something of our own, Alexander. I love you, but I can't let this pass. We can try a long-distance relationship, or you could consider finishing your residency there in a few months. Don't ask me to abandon my dreams for yours, when you're not willing to do the same for me." The rain poured heavily as Eleanor turned to leave. Alexander stopped her, grabbing her arm. "Is that it? An ultimatum? Either I choose you or my career? No, Alexander, she replied, pulling away from his grasp. You already chose. That night, in the flat that would soon no longer be hers, Eleanor was packing her things when she found a pregnancy test at the bottom of her underwear drawer. She'd bought it days earlier. She'd almost forgotten it with all the commotion. With trembling hands, she followed the instructions, waiting the longest minutes of her life. When she finally looked at the result, 2 clear lines stared back. Positive. She sank to the bathroom floor, tears flowing freely. A baby. Her baby. Both of theirs. For a moment, her hand reached for the phone. She had to tell Alexander. This would change everything, wouldn't it? But then she remembered his determined look in the cafe. I can't turn this down. His career would always come first. And what if she told him, and he still left? Or worse, what if he stayed out of obligation, resenting the lost opportunity? No. If he hadn't chosen her, he wouldn't choose a baby he didn't even know existed. With determination, she put the test in her bag. This child would be hers, and she would be enough for both of them. The day Alexander left for New York, Eleanor didn't go to the airport. Instead, she called her grandmother Mary and told her, "Granny, I'm going to be a mom, and I'm going to need your help." And now, 5 years later, fate had reunited them in that hospital corridor. The man who had chosen his career over love, and the woman who had raised their child alone. He's identical to me when I was little, Alexander murmured, unable to help himself. Leo, darling, go with Auntie Sarah for a moment, all right? Mum needs to talk to this gentleman, Eleanor said, handing the little boy to a passing nurse who nodded, sensing the tension in the air. Once alone, Eleanor confronted Alexander directly. What did you really come for, Alexander? To remind me of what you chose not to be a part of our lives. I didn't know, Eleanor. I swear I didn't know, he replied, his voice breaking. Why did you never tell me? I had a right to know. A right? The rage, suppressed for years, exploded in her voice. What right did you have after choosing New York over us? You had already made your decision, Alexander. I just made mine. Alexander took a step towards her, but Eleanor instinctively recoiled. Eleanor, please, listen to me, he pleaded. Yes, I was wrong, but I would never have chosen to miss my son's first years if I'd known he existed. And how does that change anything now? She replied bitterly. You're 5 years too late, Alexander. 5 years in which Leo learned to walk, to talk, to read, without you. A heavy silence settled between them. Down the corridor, they could see Leo happily playing with some colorful blocks that Sarah had taken from the pediatric ward. His name is Leo? Alexander finally asked with a sad smile. It was my grandfather's name. I know, Eleanor replied, surprising him. I always liked that name when you told me stories about your family. For a moment, the memory of those nights in their small flat, sharing family stories under the covers, threatened to break the barrier Eleanor had built around her heart. But she quickly recomposed herself. Look, I have patients to attend to, and you surely have an important business meeting to get back to. Eleanor, please. Alexander extended his hand to stop her, but restrained himself before touching her. Give me a chance to meet him. He's my son, too. Eleanor looked directly into his eyes, those blue eyes that Leo had inherited. How long are you in London for? Indefinitely, he replied firmly. My father had a heart attack last week. I'm here to take over the family business while he recovers. I'm sorry about your father, Eleanor said sincerely. I hope he gets better soon. Thank you. He's stable, but... He left the sentence hanging, as if he suddenly remembered he no longer had the right to share such family details with her. Eleanor, I know I don't deserve anything, but at least let me meet him. Eleanor watched her son playing at the end of the corridor. Leo had started asking questions about his father, questions for which she no longer had evasive answers. "I have a double shift today," she finally said. "Tomorrow we'll be at the park near home at 5. It's the same park. You'll recognize it." A spark of hope lit up Alexander's face. "Thank you, Eleanor. You won't regret it. I promise you." "I'm not doing this for you," she clarified. "I'm doing it for Leo. He deserves to know his father, even if it's late. But I warn you, Alexander Montgomery, if you disappear from his life again like you did from mine, I swear I—" She didn't finish the sentence. It wasn't necessary. Both knew the damage a second absence would cause. "I won't," he affirmed with a determination she hadn't seen before. "I've made many mistakes in my life, Eleanor, but abandoning my son won't be one of them." Eleanor nodded briefly, before turning on her heel and heading towards where Leo was playing. Alexander watched her walk away, noticing how his son looked up as he approached, how his eyes, his own eyes, lit up with love and trust. As he left the hospital, the magnitude of what he had just discovered hit him with full force. He had a son almost 5 years old, whom he had never seen grow up. A son who didn't even know he existed. In the taxi back to his hotel, Alexander looked out the window at the streets of London, the city he had abandoned for his ambitions. He pulled out his phone and canceled his return flight to New York, scheduled for the following week. This time, there would be no escape. This time, he would do the right thing, even if it was 5 years late. At the same time, in the hospital, Eleanor locked herself in the doctor's bathroom, trying to control the trembling in her hands. Seeing Alexander had been like an earthquake, shaking the foundations she had so carefully built over the years. "What have I done?" she asked herself quietly, looking in the mirror. Was it wrong to hide it from him? Did I do the right thing by allowing him into our lives now? There were no easy answers. Only time would tell if her decision would bring healing, or more pun. With a deep sigh, Eleanor washed her face, adjusted her stethoscope, and returned to work. Tomorrow would be another day, and with it, the beginning of a new chapter in her small family's life. What neither of them could imagine was how that casual encounter in a hospital corridor would change their lives forever, forcing them to confront not only the past they had left behind, but also a future they had never imagined. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for Alexander and Eleanor now that Leo knows about him? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unexpected turns. A father's redemption and a mother's strength. 3 years earlier in New York, the city of New York glittered under the festive lights as Alexander Montgomery gazed at the urban landscape from his office on the 32nd floor. The view was stunning, just like his glass and steel office, just like his title as the youngest vice president in the company's history. And yet, he felt hollow. "Mr. Montgomery, your mother is online too," his assistant announced over the intercom. Alexander sighed before picking up the phone. "Mom, how are you?" "Alexander, son, when are you planning to come home? It's the 3rd Christmas you'll spend alone in New York." Lady Beatrice Montgomery's voice sounded worried, as always when they spoke lately. "I have a lot of work, Mom. Maybe I can come for New Year's, but I don't promise anything." The silence on the other end of the line told him what his mother thought without words. "You know, son, your father and I are proud of your professional achievements, but we're worried that you only live to work. Have you been dating anyone since?" "I don't want to talk about that, Mom," Alexander interrupted her, more brusquely than he intended. After 5 more minutes of conversation, he hung up the phone and looked out the window again. New York was beautiful, but it wasn't London, and none of the women he had sporadically dated were Eleanor. Eleanor. It had been 2 years since his last attempt to contact her, 2 years since that message that was never answered. "I think of you every day, my love. I miss you." After that silence, He had decided to respect her decision not to keep in contact. His mobile phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Carl, a British colleague who had invited him to a party. "What's up, mate? Are you coming? Or are you going to stay cooped up in your office, as always?" Alexander smiled despite himself. Carl was the only one who understood his Scottish expressions, and even used them to make him feel less foreign. "I don't feel like it, Carl. It's been a tough week. Exactly why you need to go out. There's a lovely British woman I want to introduce you to." "No thanks," he replied almost automatically. "Mate, it's been 3 years. How long are you going to keep this up?" The question lingered in the air, even after Alexander hung up. 3 years. And still, when he closed his eyes at night, it was Eleanor's face he saw. "London." Same moment. "Mommy, look what I drew," cried a little Leo, 3 years old, running towards Eleanor with a colorful paper in his little hands. Eleanor stopped reviewing medical charts at the kitchen table to receive her son with a tired but genuine smile. "Let's see, my love. How lovely. It's a puppy." "No, Mom." Leo frowned with childish indignation. "It's a dinosaur, like in the book." Eleanor suppressed a laugh and kissed her son's forehead. "Of course it is. Sorry, it's the most beautiful dinosaur I've ever seen." From the kitchen, Granny Mary watched the scene while preparing dinner. At her 75 years old, Eleanor's grandmother had become Leo's second mother, looking after him while Eleanor finished her residency and started as a pediatrician at the children's hospital. "Leo, go wash your hands. Dinner's almost ready," Mary instructed. When the boy ran off to the bathroom, Mary approached her granddaughter. "You look exhausted, dear. Double shift again." Eleanor nodded as she rubbed her temples. "Dr. Adams is on holiday, and we're all covering his shifts. But it's all right. We need the extra money. Leo's nursery fees go up every month." Mary sat across from her, taking her hands. "Eleanor, you've done an incredible job with Leo. You're a great mom and an excellent doctor, but you also need to live a little." "Don't start with that, Granny," Eleanor sighed. "You know my priority now is Leo and my career. And what about Dr. Robert? He's a good man. He looks at you with adoring eyes." Eleanor smiled faintly. Robert was a pediatrician from the same hospital, kind and attentive, who had asked her out several times. "Robert is a colleague, nothing more. It's been 3 years, dear. Not all men are like—" "Don't say his name, please," Eleanor cut her off. "I don't want to talk about that." Just then her phone rang. It was Sarah, her best friend and colleague at the hospital. "Eleanor?" "Yes?" "Sarah." "Speak slower. I can't understand you. How? Are you sure?" The news made Eleanor genuinely smile for the first time that day. "I can't believe it. Thanks for letting me know, Sarah." After hanging up, she hugged her grandmother with enthusiasm. "They gave me the position, Granny, head of residence." Mary hugged her tightly, proud. "See? All your hard work is paying off. That Alexander doesn't know what he missed." Eleanor tensed hearing the name, but relaxed when Leo ran back into the kitchen. "I'm hungry," the little one announced, showing his freshly washed hands. As they ate dinner, Eleanor watched her son. Leo's blue eyes, so identical to his father's, looked at her with adoration. Sometimes she wondered if she had done the right thing by not telling Alexander about his existence. But then she remembered the decision he had made, and the doubt dissipated. "Mom, can I ask you something? Where's my dad?" The question hit her like a cold shower. Eleanor looked at her grandmother for help, but she knew this was a question only she could answer. "Your dad?" she began, carefully choosing her words. "Your dad lives very far from here, darling. He had to leave for work, and he can't visit us." Leo's innocent eyes pierced her. "It's complicated, my love. Maybe someday you can meet him. Does he love me?" The next question was a whisper. Eleanor felt a lump in her throat. How to explain to a 3-year-old that his father didn't even know he existed. "I'm sure that if he knew you, he would love you very much," she finally replied, hugging her son. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Eleanor found herself looking at the only photo she had kept of Alexander, hidden at the bottom of a drawer. In it, both smiled in the park where they used to walk. "Why do I still keep this?" she asked herself aloud, considering tearing it up. But as always, she couldn't. What do you think will happen now that Alexander knows about Leo? Will their past resentment overshadow this new beginning? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more emotional twists. A Father's First Steps, New York, 2 years later. Alexander's phone rang at 3 in the morning. Drowsily, he answered without looking at the caller. "Hello? Alexander, son." His mother's voice was trembling. "It's your father. He's had a heart attack." Alexander shot upright, fully awake. "How is he? Which hospital?" "He's stable for now. We're at St. Jude's Hospital in London. I'm on my way on the first available flight," he replied, already grabbing his suitcase. 4 hours later, he was on a plane bound for London, the city he had abandoned 5 years ago, the city where he had left his heart. London, present day. The doorbell rang just as Eleanor finished dressing Leo for the park. "Coming!" she shouted, adjusting her son's small backpack with toys and a snack. Opening the door, she found Sarah with a worried expression. "Are you sure about what you're going to do?" her friend asked, without even greeting her. Eleanor sighed. "Good morning to you too, Sarah." Sarah entered, closing the door behind her. "Sorry, but I just can't believe you're going to let that man into Leo's life after 5 years of absence. It wasn't exactly a voluntary absence, Sarah. He didn't know about Leo, because you chose not to tell him, and you had your reasons, Eleanor. He chose his career over you, remember?" Eleanor looked towards the room where Leo was playing, making sure he couldn't hear them. "I remember perfectly, but Leo deserves to know his father, and Alexander has a right to know his son, and if he decides to disappear again, Leo will suffer." The concern in Sarah's eyes was genuine, and Eleanor hugged her warmly. "I know, but I have to give him this chance. For Leo." Sarah looked at her fixedly. "Are you sure it's just for Leo? Aren't you getting your hopes up that—" "No, Sarah," Eleanor interrupted. "That ended 5 years ago. This is solely for Leo." But as they prepared to leave for the park, Eleanor couldn't help but look at herself in the mirror one more time, adjusting her hair and applying a little lip gloss. Just in case. The park hadn't changed much in 5 years. The same trees, the same benches, even the ice cream vendor seemed to be the same. Alexander arrived 20 minutes early, nervous as a teenager on his first date. He sat on a bench overlooking the playground, holding a small gift bag he'd bought that morning. "What do you give a son you didn't know existed?" he murmured to himself, questioning for the 10th time if the plush dinosaur was appropriate. At 5 o'clock sharp, he saw them arrive. Eleanor looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, and her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Leo walked beside her, holding her hand, and occasionally jumping with that inexhaustible energy typical of children. Alexander stood up, feeling his heart pound in his chest. When Eleanor saw him, she said something to Leo, and both approached. "Hello?" she greeted in a neutral voice. "You're early. Didn't want to miss a minute," he replied, before crouching down to Leo's height. "Hello, champion." The boy observed him with curiosity, those familiar blue eyes studying him intensely. "Are you Mummy's friend?" he finally asked. Alexander looked at Eleanor, unsure how to respond. She nodded slightly. "Yes, I'm an old friend of your Mum's. My name is Alexander." "I'm Leo, and I'm almost 5 years old," the boy replied, proudly showing his open hand. "Why haven't I seen you before?" The innocent question hit Alexander with the force of a sledgehammer. "Well, I've been living in another country, very far from here." "In Scotland?" Leo's eyes lit up. My Granny Mary says I'm half Scottish. Alexander looked at Eleanor again, surprised. She shrugged. Couldn't deny him his heritage, she said simply. No, not in Scotland, Alexander clarified. I'm from Scotland, but I was living in Spain, in a city called Madrid. Do they have dinosaurs in Madrid? Alexander smiled, suddenly remembering the gift. Not that I've seen, but look, I brought you something, he said, offering him the bag. Leo looked at his mother, who nodded, giving him permission. With enthusiasm, he opened the gift and pulled out the green plush dinosaur. A T-Rex, he exclaimed excitedly. It's my favorite. How did you know? Ooh, just a hunch, Alexander replied, glancing gratefully at the heavens for his luck. Leo, why don't you go play for a bit while I talk to Alexander? Eleanor suggested. We can see you from here. The boy nodded, hugging his new dinosaur before running towards the swings. When they were alone, an awkward silence settled between them. Thanks for coming, Alexander finally said. It means a lot to me. As I told you, I'm doing this for him, Eleanor replied, sitting on the bench. Leo has started asking questions about his father. I don't want to lie to him anymore. What have you told him about me? Only that you live far away, that you had to leave for work. I've never spoken ill of you, if that's what worries you. Alexander sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. I don't deserve it, do I, Eleanor? Not after how I left you. Eleanor looked towards the swings where Leo was playing happily. I didn't do it for you, she repeated. I did it because I didn't want him to grow up hating his father, regardless of the circumstances. They remained silent for another moment, watching Leo play. He's incredible, Alexander murmured. He's perfect, Eleanor. You've done a great job with him. A small smile appeared on Eleanor's lips. Yes, he is. He's clever, curious, and has a big heart. Though he's also stubborn and sometimes a bit bossy, she added with a soft laugh. Reminds me of someone I know. Alexander laughed too, recognizing the similarities with his own character. How have you done it, raising a child alone while finishing your residency? It hasn't been easy, she admitted. My Granny Mary has been my salvation, and Sarah, my best friend from the hospital. Between the two of them, they've helped me immensely. I wish I'd been there, Alexander said gravely, for both of you. Eleanor looked at him directly for the first time. But you weren't, Alexander. That was your choice. A choice I made without all the information, he retorted, with a hint of reproach. Are you blaming me? Eleanor's voice tensed. No, he quickly corrected. I'm just saying things would have been different if you'd told me about the pregnancy. Different how? Would you have turned down the job in New York? The question hung in the air, and Alexander's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Eleanor finally said, standing up. Look, we're not here to relive the past. We're here for Leo. Do you want to be part of his life or not? Of course I want to, Alexander replied, standing up too. More than anything in the world. Good. Then we have to establish some terms. The firm determined Eleanor that Alexander remembered had returned, momentarily replacing the worried mother. I'm listening. First, we'll go slowly. You can't tell him you're his father, not yet. To him, you're just a family friend for now. Second, if you're going to enter his life, it has to be consistently. No appearing and disappearing when it suits you. And third, any important decision about him is mine. Are we clear? Alexander nodded, accepting the conditions without hesitation. Perfectly clear. I'll do whatever it takes, Eleanor. I won't fail you this time. I won't fail him. I hope not, she replied. Because if you hurt him, Alexander, I swear I... She didn't finish the sentence. It wasn't necessary. The determination in her eyes said all that was needed. I won't, he promised. Can I ask you something else? Tell me. Can I see him regularly? Maybe take him to the zoo this weekend? Eleanor considered the request. All right, but I'll come with you. Of course, Alexander quickly accepted. Like a family. The word hung between them like an unanswered question. Eleanor avoided his gaze. Like Leo and his parents, she corrected. Don't confuse things, Alexander. Before he could respond, Leo came running back towards them, clutching his dinosaur firmly in one hand. Mom! Alexander! Did you see how high I swung? I almost touched the sky. Both smiled at his enthusiasm. We saw it, champion, Alexander replied. You're very brave. Want some ice cream? Eleanor asked, stroking her son's hair. Yes, chocolate. Go ask the man over there. See? Tell him you want a chocolate one. We'll catch up. When Leo walked away, Eleanor looked at Alexander again. One last thing. Don't buy him expensive things or spoil him too much. I don't want him to think he can get everything he wants just because you've appeared in his life. I understand, Alexander nodded. Though it's going to be hard not to spoil him. Trust me, he doesn't need any more spoiling than he already gets from my grandmother. Eleanor smiled. Now let's go get that ice cream before Leo decides to order all the flavors. As they walked towards the ice cream stall, Leo ran back and, to both their surprise, naturally took Alexander's hand. Come on, Alexander. They have dinosaur ice cream too. Alexander's heart leaped to feel his son's small hand in his. He looked at Eleanor, who watched the scene with a mixture of emotions on her face. In that moment, as the sunset bathed the park in golden light, the three walked together towards the ice cream stall. Anyone watching them would think they were a normal family, enjoying a Sunday afternoon. But they knew that reality was much more complicated, and that the path ahead would be full of challenges, secrets, and perhaps, someday, forgiveness. Do you think Alexander and Eleanor can truly build a healthy co-parenting relationship despite their complicated past? Share your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next chapter of their evolving story. A slow, steady bridge. The following weeks established a tentative routine. Alexander appeared on Sundays, taking Leo and Eleanor to the zoo, the cinema, or simply for walks around the city. Leo grew increasingly comfortable with him, asking questions about New York, about Scotland, about everything his curious mind could imagine. One day, while Leo was feeding ducks at a pond in the park, Eleanor received a call from the hospital. I have to go, she said. After hanging up, pediatric emergency. Go, don't worry, Alexander replied. I can stay with Leo. Eleanor hesitated, biting her lower lip. I don't know. You've never been alone with him. Eleanor, I'm his father, he said quietly, so Leo wouldn't hear. Trust me, I'll take him to your grandmother's house when we're done here. Finally, Eleanor agreed. All right, but call me if you need anything, and no sweets before dinner. When Eleanor left, Leo ran back. Where's Mom? She had to go to the hospital to help some children, Alexander explained, crouching to his height. So it'll be you and me for a bit. What do you think? Leo considered it for a moment, before smiling broadly. Great. Can we go on the swings? They spent the afternoon exploring the park, playing hide-and-seek, and sharing stories. When dusk began to fall, Alexander took Leo to Granny Mary's house, just as he had promised. The elderly woman opened the door with a cautious expression. You must be Alexander, she said, evaluating him with a critical gaze. Yes, madam. A pleasure to finally meet you. Granny, Alexander taught me how to make paper planes that really fly. Leo interrupted, proudly showing off his creations. How lovely, my boy. Mary smiled, stroking his head. Go wash your hands for dinner. When Leo disappeared inside the house, Mary looked back at Alexander. So you've finally returned. Madam, I didn't know about Leo, I swear I... Don't swear anything to me. Mary cut him off. Oaths are easy to make, and even easier to break. I'll only tell you one thing. That child is the most valuable thing we have. Eleanor has sacrificed a lot for him. Don't you dare appear in his life if you don't plan to stay. I'm not going anywhere, Alexander affirmed with determination. I want to be part of my son's life, and Eleanor's, if she'll allow me. Mary studied him for another moment before softening her expression slightly. Time will tell if you're a man of your word, Alexander Montgomery. For now, come in and have dinner with us. Leo would be disappointed if you left so soon. That night, Alexander dined in Mary's modest house, listening to Leo's stories about Nursery, his friends, and his favorite dinosaurs. For the first time in years, he felt he was exactly where he should be. When Eleanor arrived later, she found Leo asleep on the sofa, his head resting on Alexander's lap, who was quietly reading him a dinosaur story. He fell asleep halfway through the story, Alexander explained in a whisper. Eleanor observed the scene with a mix of contradictory emotions. Was this what their life would have been like if things had been different? A normal family, with Leo growing up with both his parents? Thanks for looking after him, she said, approaching to pick up Leo. He seems to have had fun with you. He's an incredible dream, Eleanor. Every minute with him is a gift. Their gazes met over Leo's sleeping head, and for an instant, time seemed to stand still. 5 years of separation vanished like mist under the sun, leaving only the connection they had always shared. But the moment passed as quickly as it had arrived. Eleanor broke eye contact, focusing on taking Leo to his bed. It's late, she said when she returned. You should go. Alexander nodded, understanding there was still a long way to go. Of course. Thanks for today, Eleanor. It means a lot to me. To Leo, too, she replied, accompanying him to the door. He's growing fond of you quickly. And you? He asked before he could stop himself. Eleanor looked at him seriously. I just want what's best for my son, for our son, she corrected herself. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Eleanor. As he walked back to his hotel, Alexander smiled to himself. It was a beginning. A small step on the long road to redemption, and perhaps someday, to the reconstruction of the family they never quite formed. What he didn't know was that this path was about to become much more complicated than he imagined. What do you think will be the next obstacle for Alexander and Eleanor? Will their families accept this new dynamic? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next thrilling development. The family unveiled the office. The Montgomery Group Board of Directors had assigned Alexander was almost as impressive as the one he had in New York, but he had barely noticed it. After 2 weeks in London, his thoughts were dominated by Leo and the brief moments he could spend with him. Mr. Montgomery, your father is on line 1, his new assistant announced over the intercom. Alexander picked up the phone, mentally preparing for the conversation. Dad, how are you feeling today? Better, son, better, replied the still weak voice of Edmund Montgomery. The doctors say I'll be able to go home next week. That's excellent news. Alexander genuinely smiled, relieved. How's everything at the office? Have you reviewed the contracts with the European suppliers? Everything's under control, Dad. Rest and don't worry about the business. There was a brief silence before his father continued. Your mother says you've been distracted, that something else is occupying your mind besides work. Alexander sighed. He should have imagined his mother would notice his behavior. It's complicated, Dad. I'll tell you when you're more recovered. Son, I just survived a heart attack. I think I can handle anything you have to tell me. Alexander looked at the photo of Leo he now kept on his phone. He had taken it the previous Sunday when the boy was building a sandcastle in the park. I have a son, Dad, he finally said. A boy, almost 5 years old. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Eleanor? His father finally asked, surprising him with his intuition. Yes, but I didn't know. I only found out 2 weeks ago when I found her at the children's hospital. A grandson, Edmund murmured, and Alexander could hear the emotion in his voice. A grandson we knew nothing about. Your mother is going to go mad when she finds out. Please don't tell her yet. The situation is delicate. I'm trying to win back Eleanor's trust, and above all, to get to know my son. What's his name? Leo, Alexander replied proudly. Leo Hayes. Like your grandfather, Edmund observed with approval. And what's he like? He's perfect, Dad. Clever, curious, full of energy. He has my eyes and Eleanor's smile. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Edmund asking for more details about his newly discovered grandson. When they finished, Alexander was left looking out the window, thoughtful. His father had taken the news better than expected. In fact, he seemed genuinely excited about having a grandson. How would his mother react? And how to introduce them into Leo's life without overwhelming the child or upsetting Eleanor? A message on his mobile interrupted his thoughts. It was Eleanor. Leo has a presentation at Nursery tomorrow at 10. He's playing a dinosaur. She asked if he could make it. Alexander smiled widely. It was the first time Leo had specifically asked for his presence. I wouldn't miss it for anything. I'll be there, he replied immediately. The Sunshine Nursery was decorated with drawings of prehistoric animals and giant plants. Parents settled into small chairs while the children, nervous and excited, prepared behind improvised backstages. Alexander located Eleanor in the third row and approached timidly. Can I sit with you? He asked. She nodded, moving to make space for him. Alexander noticed she wore her hair down and a floral dress that made her look younger and more relaxed than in her usual medical uniform. You look very beautiful today, he commented, unable to help himself. Thank you, she replied with a small smile. I took the day off to be here. How's Leo? Nervous? Terrified and excited in equal measure. Eleanor laughed. He's been practicing his T-Rex roar all week. Even Granny Mary knows the lines by heart. The mention of Mary reminded Alexander of something important. Eleanor, there's something I need to tell you. I told my father about Leo. Eleanor's expression tightened immediately. Why did you do that without consulting me first? I'm sorry, you're right. I should have talked to you first, Alexander acknowledged. But he noticed something was up and, well, he just had a heart attack. I didn't want to lie to him. Eleanor sighed, processing the information. How did he take it? Surprisingly well. He's excited to have a grandson. Alexander paused. He wants to meet him, Eleanor. My mother too, though I haven't told her anything yet. And did you tell them that's not so simple? Leo is just getting to know you. Of course, I made it clear that everything has to go at your and Leo's pace. Before they could continue the conversation, the lights dimmed, and the teacher announced the beginning of the play, A Day in the Age of Dinosaurs. The play was charmingly chaotic, as one would expect from a production performed by preschool children. Some forgot their lines, others spoke too softly, and a small triceratops decided halfway through the show that he preferred to be a superhero. But Leo shone as the proud T-Rex he was. When his big moment came, he stepped forward and roared with such conviction that several children in the front row feigned terror while their parents laughed and applauded. Eleanor discreetly but instinctively took Alexander's hand during their son's roar, squeezing it with shared pride. He intertwined his fingers with hers, and for a perfect moment, they were simply two parents marveling at their son. When the lights came up and Eleanor realized their hands were clasped, she quickly pulled away, as if the contact had burned her. I'll go get him, she said, standing up hastily. Alexander nodded, giving her space, but his hand still held the warmth of hers. Moments later, Leo came running towards him, still in parts of his dinosaur costume. Alexander, did you see me? Did you hear my roar? He asked excitedly. Of course, champion, Alexander replied, crouching down to receive the child's impact. You were the most terrifying dinosaur of all time. I know, Leo exclaimed with adorable arrogance. Granny couldn't come because her knees hurt, but Mum filmed everything to show her. And I'll buy an ice cream for the best dinosaur in the world, Alexander added. If your mum agrees, of course. Leo looked at his mother with pleading eyes. Can we, Mum, please? Eleanor pretended to consider it seriously. I don't know. Do dinosaurs eat ice cream? Yes, Leo insisted with conviction. Especially after scaring a whole class. The three laughed, and for a moment, anyone watching them would think they were a normal family, celebrating their child's school achievement. How do you feel about Alexander telling his father about Leo? Do you think this will lead to more complications or healing for the family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the unfolding drama. The road to acceptance, the weeks turned into months, and Alexander gradually integrated into Leo's routine. Sunday outings, afternoon playdates, even some dinners at Granny Mary's house, who slowly began to accept his presence. One afternoon, while Leo was taking his nap after an exhausting day at the zoo, Alexander and Eleanor talked in hushed tones in the small living room of the flat. I think it's time to tell him the truth, Eleanor, Alexander said, looking towards the room where their son slept. It's been almost 3 months. Leo keeps asking more and more why you spend so much time with us. Eleanor nodded slowly. She had been thinking the same thing. I know. This morning he asked me if you were my boyfriend. She smiled weakly. I told him no, and then he asked why you were always with us if we weren't dating. And what did you tell him? That we're friends, but I know it's not enough. He's a clever boy, Alex. He knows there's something more. The use of his diminutive name, something Eleanor hadn't done since their reunion, didn't go unnoticed by Alexander. It was a small sign that the barriers between them were beginning to soften. How do you think we should do it? He asked. With the simple truth, without complications or elaborate explanations, Eleanor replied. Alexander is your dad. That's all you need to know for now. And if he asks where I've been all these years? Eleanor sighed, rubbing her temples. We'll tell him you were working far away, but that now you've come back to be with him. He doesn't need to know more details for now. Eleanor, Alexander hesitated, searching for the right words. I want to thank you for this, for giving me the opportunity to be part of his life. I know you didn't have to. It's the right thing to do, Alex. Leo deserves to know his father, she replied, looking at him directly. And you've shown that you truly want to be part of his life. The moment of honesty between them was interrupted by Leo's sleepy voice from the hallway. Mom, I'm thirsty. Eleanor got up to attend to him, but before leaving, she looked at Alexander. Tomorrow. We'll tell him tomorrow. The next day, Alexander arrived early at the flat, bringing a cake that read, For Leo with Love. He was more nervous than he had been for any corporate presentation or multi-million-pound negotiation. Eleanor had prepared the atmosphere, a quiet afternoon at home, with Leo's favorite toys and a relaxed ambiance. Leo, darling, Eleanor began, when the three of them were sitting in the living room. Alexander and I want to talk to you about something important. The boy looked at them with curiosity, nibbling on a biscuit. Is it something bad? He asked. Always perceptive. No, my love, nothing bad, Eleanor reassured him. In fact, it's something very good. Alexander took a deep breath before speaking. Leo, do you remember you asked me why I spent so much time with you? The boy nodded, watching him attentively. Well, it's because... Alexander looked at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. It's because I'm your dad, Leo. Leo's big blue eyes widened, darting from Alexander to his mother and back to Alexander. My dad? He repeated incredulously. You're my real dad? Yes, darling, Eleanor confirmed, moving to sit next to her son. Alexander is your dad. Leo was silent for what seemed like an eternity, processing the information with his almost 5-year-old mind. Why didn't you tell me before? He finally asked. Because we wanted you to get to know Alexander well first, Eleanor explained, so you'd feel comfortable with him. And why weren't you with us before? The next question was directed squarely at Alexander and contained all the innocent confusion and pain of a child who had grown up without a father. Alexander knelt in front of Leo, gently placing a hand on his small shoulder. Because I was working very far away, champion, in another country. He looked briefly at Eleanor, deciding to keep the explanation simple. And I didn't know I had such a wonderful son as you, but now that I do, I'm not going anywhere. If you'll let me, I want to be your dad every day, not just on Sundays. Leo processed this with a furrowed brow of concentration. So I can call you Dad? He asked timidly. Nothing would make me happier, Alexander replied, his voice breaking with emotion. What happened next surprised both adults. Leo launched himself into Alexander's arms, hugging him tightly. I have a dad, he exclaimed with pure joy. Like James and Charlie, wait till I tell them. Eleanor watched the scene with contained tears. Seeing her son embrace the man who had once left her stirred contradictory emotions. Joy for Leo, who finally had the father he had always wished for, and an old pain that had never completely healed. When Leo pulled away from the hug, he looked at his parents with comical seriousness. So now you're going to live together like James's parents? He asked innocently. The question dropped like a bomb in the room. Alexander and Eleanor exchanged uncomfortable glances. No, darling, Eleanor replied gently. Dad and I don't live together. But we both love you very much and will always be with you. But why not? Leo insisted, confused. Sophia says mums and dads live together. Some mums and dads live in different houses, Leo, Alexander explained. But that doesn't mean we love you any less. In fact, you're lucky because you have two houses, Mum's and mine. You have a house? Leo's eyes lit up with renewed interest. Can I see it? Of course, Alexander smiled, relieved by the change of subject. In fact, I'm looking for a new house here in London. Maybe you could help me choose it. Yes, Leo exclaimed enthusiastically. I want one with a swimming pool and a room just for me. The adults laughed, grateful for children's adaptability. While Leo ran to his room to find something he wanted to show his newly discovered father, Eleanor and Alexander exchanged a look of relief. That went better than I expected, she commented quietly. He's an incredible boy, Eleanor. You've done a wonderful job with him. Thank you, Eleanor replied with a small smile. But the difficult questions will come later, when he processes everything. We'll be ready, Alexander assured her. Together. The word floated between them, loaded with meaning. Together as parents, or perhaps someday as something more. Before they could explore that idea, Leo ran back with his photo album, eager to show his father all the photos of his life he had missed. And as the three of them sat looking through the album pages, with Leo explaining each photo in detail, they formed a picture that anyone would have mistaken for a family that had always been together. But both Alexander and Eleanor knew that the journey to truly becoming a family was just beginning. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for Alexander and Eleanor now that Leo knows the truth? Will they overcome their past to build a future together? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next emotional turning point, testing the bonds. The first few weeks after Leo learned the truth about his father had been a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. The boy alternated between moments of euphoria at finally having a dad and periods of confusion and increasingly difficult questions to answer. Why didn't you know, Mum, if I'm your son? He asked one afternoon, while Alexander was helping him build a dinosaur model. Eleanor, who was preparing snacks in the kitchen, strained her ears to hear the answer. I did know your mom, champion, Alexander replied carefully. In fact, your mom and I were very good friends before you were born. And why didn't you know I was going to be born? Alexander looked towards the kitchen, seeking help. But Eleanor pretended to be busy. This was one of those questions she had anticipated, and it was only fair that Alexander find a way to answer it. Well, Alexander chose his words carefully. I went to work very far away before I knew you were on the way. And when I came back, I had the most wonderful surprise in the world to discover I had such an amazing son like you. Leo seemed satisfied with the answer for the moment, focusing back on his dinosaur model. But Eleanor knew more questions would come with time, each one more complex. Life had acquired a new normal. Alexander had rented a flat a few blocks from Eleanor's house and spent as much time with them as his business obligations allowed. On weekends, Leo alternated. Some he spent entirely with his father, others with his mother. And occasionally, the three of them made plans together. One Saturday afternoon, while Leo was enjoying his swimming lesson, Alexander and Eleanor waited in the sports club cafe. My parents insist on meeting him, Eleanor, Alexander commented, stirring his coffee. My mother practically harasses me with daily messages asking when she can see her grandson. Eleanor sighed. It was a topic they had been avoiding. I know, and I understand they want to meet him. It's just that... She hesitated, searching for the right words. I don't want to overwhelm him with too many changes at once. It's been almost 2 months since we told him the truth, Alexander pointed out. He's adapted incredibly well. I think he's ready to meet his grandparents. Eleanor toyed with her napkin, thoughtful. How about lunch at my grandmother's house? She finally suggested. Neutral, but familiar ground for Leo. We could invite your parents this Sunday. Alexander's smile lit up his face. Seriously? That would be perfect. My parents will be delighted. But with conditions, Eleanor added, raising a finger. No extravagant gifts. No promises they can't keep. And above all, no comments about us. Us? Alexander repeated, raising an eyebrow with interest. You know what I mean, she replied, avoiding his gaze. No insinuations about a reconciliation or about forming a traditional family. I don't want Leo to get his hopes up. And you? Alexander asked softly. Are you getting your hopes up, Eleanor? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and dangerous. Eleanor finally looked up, meeting those blue eyes she had never been able to forget. That's not fair, Alexander, she said quietly. You can't disappear for 5 years and expect everything to go back to how it was. I don't expect that, he replied, leaning forward. I know I hurt you. I know I made the wrong decision. But people make mistakes, Eleanor, and some of us deserve a second chance. This isn't just about us, she retorted. It's about Leo. We can't play with his feelings. Before Alexander could respond, they saw Leo running towards them, his hair wet, and a wide smile on his face. Mom! Dad! The teacher says I can almost swim without a float now. The pride in his voice when he said Dad still made Alexander's heart leap every time. That's incredible, champion, he exclaimed, picking him up, not caring that he was wet. Soon you'll be like a fish. Or like a mosasaur, Leo corrected, always faithful to his dinosaur obsession. They were giant marine reptiles. Eleanor smiled, drying her son's hair with a towel. My little paleontologist. Let's get you changed before you catch a cold. As Eleanor took Leo to the changing rooms, Alexander watched them walk away, thinking about their interrupted conversation. Was there really a possibility for them? Or was he chasing an impossible dream? Sunday arrived with perfect weather and frayed nerves. Granny Mary had prepared a traditional English roast dinner, determined to impress her great-grandson's Scottish grandparents. Eleanor wore a simple but elegant blue dress, and found herself checking her appearance in the mirror more often than usual. You look beautiful, my dear, Mary commented, catching her in the act. As if you want to impress someone. It's not that, Granny, Eleanor denied, blushing slightly. I just want to make a good impression on Alexander's parents." "Uh-huh," the old woman replied with a knowing smile. "And I was born yesterday." Before Eleanor could defend herself, the doorbell rang. Leo ran to open it, excited by the prospect of meeting his other grandparents. Alexander entered first, followed by Edmund and Beatrice Montgomery. Edmund, still recovering from his heart attack, walked with the aid of a cane, but his presence was still imposing. Beatrice, elegant in a designer outfit, looked around with barely disguised curiosity. "Dad!" Leo exclaimed, throwing himself into Alexander's arms. "Hello, champion," he smiled, kissing his forehead before turning to his parents. "Leo, I want to introduce you to some very special people. These are your grandparents, Edmund and Beatrice." Leo observed them with childish curiosity. The resemblance between Alexander and his father was undeniable, especially in the shape of their jawline and their gaze. "Hello," he said shyly. "Are you my grandparents from Scotland?" Beatrice, who until then had maintained a composed expression, crouched down to the boy's height, and her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, my beautiful boy," she replied, her voice breaking with emotion. "We're your grandparents, who came from very far to meet you." Leo, always warm, surprised her with a spontaneous hug that melted any initial tension. Edmund, more reserved, waited his turn to shake his grandson's small hand solemnly. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Leo," he said gravely. "You have the Montgomery eyes." "Really?" Leo asked, excited by the connection. "Dad says the same thing." Eleanor observed the scene with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was happy to see Leo so excited. On the other, she couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment towards this family that now appeared in their lives as if nothing had happened. "Eleanor," Beatrice's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Thank you for allowing us to meet our grandson. You don't know how much it means to us." There was sincerity in her voice, and Eleanor found herself nodding. Leo deserves to know all his family. The meal went surprisingly well. Granny Mary and Beatrice found common ground in their love for cooking, exchanging recipes and techniques. Edmund, initially formal, relaxed when Leo began to show him his dinosaur collection, explaining each species with adorable seriousness. Alexander observed the interactions with a mix of relief and hope. Seeing them all together, sharing the table, laughing and talking like a normal extended family, was more than he had dared to dream. At one point, he found himself alone with Eleanor in the kitchen, while the others enjoyed dessert on the patio. "Everything's going well, don't you think?" he commented, helping her serve coffee. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Your parents are different from how I imagined." "More human?" Alexander suggested with a mischievous smile. "Something like that." Eleanor smiled. "Your mother isn't the witch I'd built up in my mind, and your grandmother hasn't tried to poison me with the food, so that's a victory too." Both laughed, sharing a moment of complicity that reminded them of old times. Without thinking, Alexander moved closer and brushed a lock of hair from Eleanor's face. "You look beautiful today, Eleanor," he murmured. "Well, you look beautiful every day, but today especially." Eleanor stood still, caught between the desire to pull away and the longing to draw closer. Alexander's fingertips grazed her cheek in a caress so light it could have been imaginary. "Alex, we can't," she began, but her voice lacked conviction. "Why not?" he asked, moving a little closer. "We're adults. Leo is happy. Our families get along. What's stopping us, Eleanor?" Their faces were so close they could feel each other's breath. 5 years of separation seemed to evaporate with each second. "I'm scared," Eleanor confessed in a whisper. "Scared you'll leave again. Scared Leo will get hurt. Scared to trust again." "I'm not going anywhere," Alexander promised, taking her hand. My place is here, with you, with my family. The moment seemed perfect for a kiss they both secretly longed for, but they were interrupted by Leo's voice calling from the patio. "Mom! Dad! Come see the trick Granddad Edmund taught me." They quickly separated, like teenagers caught by their parents. Eleanor took the coffee tray with slightly trembling hands. "Let's go," she said, avoiding Alexander's gaze. "They're waiting for us." But something had changed between them. A door they both thought closed forever had ajarred, letting in a ray of hope. What do you think will happen next in Alexander and Eleanor's journey? Will they finally give in to their feelings? Share your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the ultimate emotional turning point. The ultimate choice. The following week brought a more established routine. Alexander dined with Eleanor and Leo almost every night. He helped the boy with his homework, and then returned to his flat, which felt less and less like a home, and more like a transitional place. One afternoon, while Leo was at his taekwondo class, Eleanor received a call that would change everything. "Dr. Hayes," she answered professionally. "Yes? Sarah?" "Speak slower. I can't understand you." "How? Are you sure?" When Alexander arrived to pick them up, he found Eleanor unusually quiet. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing her worried expression. "I'll tell you later," she replied, discreetly nodding towards Leo, who was excitedly telling him about his new kick. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Eleanor invited Alexander to stay and talk. "I was offered a position in New York," she announced without preamble. "At the International Hospital, the same one where you were going to work when we broke up," Alexander completed, surprised. "Eleanor, that's incredible, isn't it?" "I don't know," she confessed, running a hand through her hair. "It's a unique opportunity. Head of Pediatric Research Department, a professional dream. And you're considering accepting it?" Alexander asked, feeling a knot in his stomach at the possibility of her taking Leo far away. "Just now that we're starting to be a family, Eleanor? Just now that Leo has a dad?" Eleanor looked at him with a mix of emotions. "I know, and it's what's hardest for me to decide," she admitted. "Leo adores you, Alex. These months with you have been wonderful for him. And for you?" Alexander asked, moving closer to her on the sofa. "Have they been wonderful for you too?" Eleanor lowered her gaze, but Alexander gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Be honest, Eleanor. For once, think about what you want, not just what's best for Leo or for your career." "I'm scared," she finally confessed, her voice breaking. "Scared to admit I never stopped loving you, even when I wanted to hate you. Scared that if I let my guard down, if I trust again, I'll end up with a broken heart again." Alexander took her hands in his. "And I'm scared of losing you again," he said sincerely, "of losing both of you. But I'm more scared of not trying, Eleanor, of not fighting for us." Slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, Alexander leaned towards her. This time, there were no interruptions. Their lips met in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened, releasing 5 years of yearning and suppressed feelings. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily, as if they had run a marathon. "What are we going to do?" Eleanor whispered, resting her forehead against his. "I don't know," Alexander replied. "But whatever it is, we'll decide it together this time, as a family." That night, Alexander didn't return to his flat. For the first time in 5 years, he slept under the same roof as Eleanor, with the tacit promise of a new beginning. But the offer from New York was still on the table, like a shadow threatening their budding happiness. Would Eleanor choose her career over love this time? Or would they finally find a way to balance their professional and personal dreams? The answer would have to wait, because fate had one more surprise in store for them. One that would test their rekindled love and newly formed family in a way neither of them could imagine. What do you think Eleanor will decide? Will she choose her dream job in New York or stay in London for Alexander and Leo? Share your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the thrilling conclusion. A forever home. Alexander woke with the dawn light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, he felt disoriented until he remembered where he was. In Eleanor's bed, with her snuggled against his chest, breathing softly in dreams. They hadn't made love. Both had tacitly agreed it was too soon, that they needed time to rebuild what they once had. But they had slept embraced, talking in whispers until the early hours of the morning, making up for 5 years of absence. Carefully, so as not to wake her, Alexander brushed a lock of hair from Eleanor's face. She looked so peaceful, so beautiful. Time had added small lines around her eyes, marks of laughter and worries he hadn't shared. His phone vibrated on the bedside table. A message from New York. Alexander ignored it. Anything related to the office could wait. "Good morning," Eleanor murmured, slowly opening her eyes. "Have you been awake long?" "Long enough to make sure you're not a dream," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I was afraid I'd wake up and find it had all been my imagination." Eleanor smiled, stretching like a cat. "It's not a dream, though I still can't believe you're here, in my bed." "Do you regret it?" Alexander asked, suddenly insecure. "No," she replied firmly. "It's just that everything's happening very fast. A few months ago, you didn't even know you had a son, and now we're together," he completed. "Is that what we are, Eleanor? Are we together?" Before she could answer, the bedroom door burst open, and Leo appeared in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mom, He stopped when he saw Alexander in his mother's bed. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Eleanor and Alexander exchanged panicked glances. They hadn't planned how to explain this to their son. "Good morning, champion," Alexander greeted, trying to sound casual. "I came very early to have breakfast with you both." "In pajamas?" Leo asked, too observant for his age. Eleanor decided honesty was the best policy. "Dad stayed the night, darling," she explained. "Sometimes, when two people really like each other, they like to sleep together." Leo's eyes lit up with understanding and excitement. "Like James's parents!" he exclaimed. "Does that mean you're going to live together? Are we going to be a normal family?" The innocent but hopeful question left them speechless for a moment. "Come here, my love." Eleanor extended her arms, inviting Leo to join them in bed. "We're already a family, even if we don't all live in the same house. But it would be better if we lived together, wouldn't it?" Leo insisted, settling comfortably between them. "Then we could have breakfast together every day, and Dad could read me stories every night." Alexander and Eleanor exchanged glances over their son's head. The situation was complicated, especially with the New York offer pending. "You know what?" Alexander said, changing the subject. "I think today's a perfect day for pancakes. Who wants to help me make them?" "Me," Leo exclaimed, momentarily forgetting the previous topic. "With chocolate chips." As the two headed to the kitchen, Eleanor stayed in bed for a moment longer, reflecting. The hope in Leo's eyes when he imagined a normal family had touched her heart, but it also reminded her how much he could be hurt if things didn't work out between her and Alexander. And then there was New York, an opportunity that, ironically, was very similar to the one that had separated Alexander from her 5 years ago. Life, apparently, had a twisted sense of humor. The phone's vibration woke Eleanor in the middle of the night. Beside her, Alexander was sleeping soundly. 3 weeks had passed since that first night together, and now he practically lived with them, though he kept his flat as a formality. "Hello?" she whispered, trying not to wake Alexander. "Dr. Hayes, this is Dr. Miller from the International Hospital in New York." The voice on the other end was formal, but kind. "Sorry for the late hour, but with the time difference, it was the only available moment." "Don't worry," Eleanor replied, silently getting out of bed and leaving the room. "How can I help you?" "We need your answer regarding our offer, doctor. The board of directors meets tomorrow to finalize hirings, and your name is on the priority list." Eleanor sighed. She had been avoiding making a decision, postponing the inevitable. "I still need a little more time to consider it, doctor. My son's situation—" "I completely understand," he interrupted her. "In fact, that's one of the reasons I'm calling you. We're willing to offer you additional conditions, help finding an excellent school for your son, housing assistance, and even special permission to work flexible hours during the adaptation period." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was almost impossible to refuse from a professional point of view. "I thank you very much," Eleanor replied. "I'll give you my definitive answer tomorrow without fail." After hanging up, Eleanor sat in the dark living room, thinking. What should she do? Accept the best professional opportunity of her life, or stay for a relationship that was just beginning to bloom? "Who was that?" Alexander's voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway, hair disheveled, looking worried. "New York," she replied simply. "They need my answer tomorrow." Alexander sat beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "And what have you decided?" "I don't know, Alex," she confessed, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of job I always dreamed of. But Leo is so happy here with you, and we're just starting over." "Eleanor," Alexander spoke with an unusual seriousness, "I need you to listen to me. I love you. I don't think I ever stopped loving you, even when I was thousands of miles away building an empty career. And all I want is for you and Leo to be happy." "But let me finish," he pleaded. 5 years ago, I asked you to give up your career for me. It was selfish and wrong. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice." "What do you mean?" she asked, confused. "That if New York is where your dream is, then New York is where we should be. All three of us." Eleanor looked at him with disbelief. "You'd come with us? You'd leave everything here?" "In a heartbeat," he replied without hesitation. "I can manage the company from anywhere. My father is almost recovered and can resume control. The only thing that matters is that we're together, Eleanor. This time, I choose my family." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes, overflowing uncontrollably. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of renewed love. "I love you," she said simply, before kissing him with all the love and passion held back for years. This time, there were no more barriers between them. They gave themselves to each other as if it were the first time, rediscovering their bodies, their souls, the love that had never truly died. The next morning brought with it the light of a new day and a long-considered decision. Eleanor had spent hours on the terrace contemplating the sunrise over London, the city that had been her home all her life. When Alexander joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee, his serene expression told her he had reached a conclusion. "I'm not going to accept the position in New York," Eleanor announced without preamble. Alexander looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure? Last night I was confused," she explained, taking a sip of coffee. "I thought I had to choose between my career and our family, but this morning I realized that's not the case." "I don't understand." "I spoke with Sarah an hour ago," Eleanor continued. "She's going to accept the New York offer, and I proposed a new pediatric research department here in London to the hospital director." "We've needed one for years," Alexander said, starting to understand. "And what did he say?" "That we would need funding," Eleanor smiled. "And conveniently, I know a successful businessman who might be interested in supporting the cause." Alexander burst out laughing. "Very shrewd, Dr. Hayes. Are you using my feelings to get funding? Absolutely, she joked. Will it work? You know it will, he replied, kissing her softly. But Eleanor, are you really sure? I don't want you to sacrifice your dreams for us. Eleanor took his face in her hands, looking directly into his eyes. My dream is to help children, to research, to make a difference. I can do that here or in New York. But my home, Alex, my home is where you and Leo are. And our home is here, where we can be close to Granny Mary, where Leo has his friends, his school, where we can build something together without anyone having to sacrifice. Emotion overwhelmed Alexander. This time, no one had to give up anything. This time, they had found a way to be happy together. I love you, Eleanor, he murmured against her lips. I love you so much. It hurts. I love you too, Alex, she replied. I always did, even when I tried to forget you. The sound of little footsteps interrupted them. Leo appeared on the terrace, still in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Good morning, he yawned. Why are you up so early? We were planning a surprise, Alexander improvised, exchanging a complicit glance with Eleanor. What surprise? Leo's eyes lit up with interest. Eleanor crouched down to his height. You see, darling, Dad and I have been talking, and we thought maybe you'd like us all to live together as a family. Really? Leo exclaimed, wide awake now. Dad's going to live with us forever? Well, I was thinking of something better, Alexander interjected. How about we look for a new house, a big one, with a garden for you to play in, and maybe even a special room for your dinosaurs? Yes, Leo shouted, jumping with excitement. And with a swimming pool? It can have a swimming pool. We can look for one with a swimming pool, Eleanor conceded, laughing at his enthusiasm. But you'll have to promise you'll always swim with an adult present. I promise, Leo assured solemnly, before launching himself into both their arms. We're going to be like real families, embraced, the three of them on the terrace. Under the morning sun, Alexander and Eleanor exchanged looks of deep love and gratitude. The path had been long and difficult, full of wrong decisions and second chances. But finally, they had found their way to be together, without sacrifices, without renunciations. While Leo excitedly talked about how he wanted to decorate his new room, Alexander remembered something important. There's one more thing we have to do, he said, gently pulling away from the hug, to search for something in his trouser pocket. To Eleanor's surprise, he pulled out a small paper flower, carefully preserved despite the years. You kept it all this time? She asked, recognizing the origami flower he'd given her on their first date. I could never get rid of it, Alexander confessed. It was the only thing I had left of you. Kneeling before her, with Leo watching curiously beside him, Alexander presented the delicate paper flower as if it were the most precious of diamonds. Eleanor Hayes, I have loved you across continents and years. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of officially sharing the life we are already building together? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, unable to speak from emotion. Say yes, Mum, Leo exclaimed, impatient at her silence. Yes, she finally managed to say, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, Alexander Montgomery, I will marry you. As they kissed with Leo jumping and clapping around them, Alexander knew he had finally made the right decision. Not his career, not New York, not business success, but his family. Love. The home he had always sought without knowing it. What an incredibly satisfying proposal. What do you think is the most important lesson Alexander and Eleanor learned on their journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the beautiful conclusion. A love story for the ages 6 months later, in Granny Mary's garden, under a canopy of soft lights and white flowers. Alexander and Eleanor pledged their eternal love, surrounded by their loved ones. Leo, proud bearer of the rings, walked solemnly down the aisle, perfectly fulfilling his important mission. Life hadn't been easy for them. They had taken separate paths. They had suffered. They had doubted. But in the end, when Alexander slipped the ring onto Eleanor's finger and she did the same with him, they knew that everything, the pain, the distance, the waiting, had been worth it. Because some people are destined to find each other, no matter how many detours they take along the way. And as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, with Leo clumsily trying to join them, Eleanor whispered in Alexander's ear, "Thank you for coming back to me. I'll never leave again," he promised. "My home is where you are, where our family is." And this time, both knew it was a promise that would last forever. 5 years had passed since that reunion in the hospital corridor. 5 years since Alexander discovered he had a son. 5 years since Eleanor decided to give a second chance to the man who had once broken her heart. The house they had chosen together, in a quiet residential neighborhood of London, now echoed with the laughter of 3 children. Leo, now 10 years old, ran around the garden chasing his 3-year-old twin sisters, Lily and Rose, named in honor of the 2 women who had been pillars in Eleanor's life. From the terrace, Alexander watched the scene with a smile as he prepared the barbecue for Sunday lunch. Beside him, Edmund, who had decided to spend his retirement years in England to be close to his grandchildren, gave him advice on the perfect temperature for the meat. "Not too high, son," said the man whose hair had turned completely white. "The secret is patience, like everything in life, isn't it?" Alexander replied, thinking of how much patience his own journey had required. In the kitchen, Eleanor and Beatrice prepared salads, while Granny Mary, who at her 75 years old was still the soul of family gatherings, supervised the preparation of her famous apple crumble. "More cinnamon, daughter-in-law," Mary insisted, causing a laugh from Beatrice, who was already accustomed to her mother-in-law's culinary demands. The doorbell announced the arrival of more guests. Leo ran to open it, closely followed by the twins, who adored being the first to greet visitors. "Auntie Sarah," the boy exclaimed, hugging the woman who had just arrived. "You brought Charlie." Sarah, who had returned from New York a year ago to work at the new pediatric research center founded by Eleanor and funded by Montgomery Group, entered with her husband and young son. Eleanor went out to greet her friend with a warm hug. The 2 women had maintained their close friendship, despite the distance, and Sarah's return to London had been an unexpected blessing. The center they directed together had become an international reference in innovative pediatric treatments. "You arrived just in time," Eleanor smiled. "We were about to serve appetizers. How's everything at the center?" "The results of the new treatment are promising," Sarah replied, hanging up her coat. "The article is almost ready to send to the journal." "No work today," Alexander intervened, coming to greet them. "It's Family Sunday, remember?" Eleanor rolled her eyes, with feigned exasperation, but kissed him softly before returning to the kitchen. After 5 years together, 3 of them married, they still sometimes behaved like newlyweds. The afternoon passed like so many other Sundays. Abundant food, lively conversations, children's laughter, and that feeling of belonging that only a united family can give. While the adults chatted on the terrace and the children played under Beatrice's supervision, Alexander approached Eleanor and took her hand, discreetly guiding her towards the back garden. "What's wrong?" she asked, intrigued by his sudden mystery. "I wanted to show you something," Alexander replied, leading her to the large oak tree that dominated the back of the garden. There, hanging from one of the lowest branches, was a small wooden box. "What is this?" "Open it," he smiled. With curiosity, Eleanor opened the box to find an old pregnancy test, yellowed with time, but carefully preserved, along with the origami flower Alexander had given her on their first date, and which he had used to propose years later. "How?" she began, surprised. "I found it among your things when we moved," Alexander explained. "I never mentioned I'd seen it, but I always thought it was important to keep. It's the beginning of our story, Eleanor. The moment that changed our lives, even if I didn't know it then." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes as she held the test that had confirmed Leo's pregnancy, that object that had witnessed her most vulnerable and solitary moment. "I want us to keep it here," Alexander continued, pointing to the box. "And every year, on the anniversary of our reunion, we'll add something new, a symbol of our story, of our family, so our children will someday know everything we went through to be together." Eleanor couldn't contain her emotion. She hugged Alexander tightly, silently grateful for the path that had led them to that moment. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "Sometimes I can't believe how much." "I love you more," he replied, kissing her hair. "Every day a little more than the last." "Mom, Dad," Leo's voice interrupted their intimate moment. "Granddad Edmund says the meat is burning." Laughing, they returned hand in hand to the terrace, where their united families awaited them. On the way, Leo caught up with them, curious as always. "What were you doing?" he asked, looking towards the oak tree in the distance. Alexander and Eleanor exchanged a complicit glance. "Remembering," Eleanor simply replied. "Remembering what?" the boy insisted. Alexander crouched down to his son's height, that child who had come into his life in the most unexpected way, and who had changed everything forever. "Someday we'll tell you the whole story, champion," he promised. "The story of how your mum and I broke up, found each other again, and built this family. It's a story with sad moments, but with a very happy ending." Leo considered it for a moment, with that serious expression he wore when reflecting on something important. "Can I put something in the box?" he finally asked, surprising them. "I saw you putting things in there." Eleanor nodded, touched by his perception. "Of course, my love. It's our family's memory box. What do you want to put in?" Without answering, Leo ran to the house and returned minutes later with a drawing in his hand. It was a simple portrait, but full of affection. 3 large figures and 2 small ones, all smiling under a bright sun. "It's us," he explained, pointing to each figure. "You, Dad, me, and the twins. Our family." Alexander felt a lump in his throat as he looked at the drawing. Who would have thought? That rainy day when he had chosen his career over Eleanor, that destiny would offer them such a perfect second chance. Together, the 3 walked to the oak tree and placed the drawing in the box, thus sealing another chapter in their family story. When they returned to the terrace, where the twins chased each other around the adults' legs and conversations flowed animatedly, Alexander looked around with deep gratitude. His father chatting amiably with Granny Mary, his mother playing with her granddaughters, Sarah and her husband sharing anecdotes with the other guests, and above all, Eleanor by his side. Radiant and happy, the woman he had never stopped loving despite distance and time. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his contemplative gaze. "That it was worth it," Alexander replied. "Every tear, every difficult moment, every wrong decision, it all brought us here, and I wouldn't change a single second." "Not even New York?" Eleanor teased, referring to the decision that once separated them. "Especially not New York," he smiled, "because without that separation, perhaps we never would have learned to value what we had, what we have." Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder, observing the family scene with equal gratitude. Life hadn't been easy, but it had given them exactly what they needed. Not a path without obstacles, but the strength to overcome them together. "You know what's most ironic?" she said, as they watched Leo teach the twins a new trick. That in the end, none of us had to give up on our dreams. You have your career, I have mine, and together we have this, the family we always wanted. It's not ironic, Alexander corrected, kissing her forehead. It's poetic justice, the universe balancing the scales. The sun began to set, bathing the scene with the same golden light that, years ago, illuminated their walks in the park when they were young and dreamed of a future together. A future that, through unexpected and sometimes painful paths, they had managed to build. And as they watched their children play, both knew with certainty that they had made the right decision that afternoon on the terrace 5 years ago. Because sometimes, the hardest path is precisely the one that leads us home. Tomorrow I have to travel to Manchester for the new center, Eleanor commented, remembering her obligations. I know, Alexander replied. The girls and I will be waiting for you with a surprise. Another one? She smiled. There will always be another, he promised. A whole life of surprises, because you deserve it, Eleanor. You deserve everything. And as the sun disappeared over the horizon, they sealed that promise with a kiss, knowing that their story, far from ending, was just beginning a new and exciting chapter. Because true love isn't perfect or easy. It's complicated, sometimes painful, always challenging. But when it's real, when it's deep, no distance is too great, no obstacle too high, and no time too long. Alexander and Eleanor had learned it the hard way, and now, surrounded by the family they had built together, they reaped the fruits of their perseverance and their unwavering faith in the healing power of love. A love that, like them, had matured with time, strengthening with every test, with every tear, with every reconciliation. A love that finally had found its way back home. What an incredible, fulfilling journey. What part of Alexander and Eleanor's story inspired you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more truly inspiring narratives. Sources: